Hi folks, this is Rose from In Rose's Garden, and today we're going to work on a necklace using the JJB Beads Mini Mix Aurora Borealis, as well as a really pretty piece of purple fairy silk. Isn't this a gorgeous color? So let's turn down and we'll talk about what we're going to do, and we'll get this done. So what we have here, as I said, the Aurora Borealis bead mix, fairy silk, some little tiny silver ring links, a magnetic clasp, some crimp tubes, a little bail, and some purple amethyst SoftFlex beading wire, as well as a little bit of 20 gauge silver German style wire from Beadalon. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a pendant using this really pretty big bead and this flower. And then we're going to bring it up to the bail. And then we're going to put a little bit of this through the bail, but not very much, just a hunk about this big. And then we'll put a silver ring on either side. And then we're going to put a little bead strand up each side, putting in another little silver ring and finishing with our fairy silk. So let's get our beads pulled out here that we are going to use. And I am thinking we're going to use these pearls. And then these. I really like these bohos, but I'm not going to use them because I want that pinkish colored pearl in the middle. I might save those for some earrings. These little blue ones. Okay, let's see. Okay, like that bead strand, so I think that's what we're going to go with. And then the next thing we need to do is to get some spacer beads to go between these this bead strand. Okay, I've got a pile of little spacers here that I found, and I added a few more beads to the crystal here for our pendant. So the first thing we should do is get the pendant made, and then I think what I'm going to do is just work up the little bead strands, put them on a ring on either side, and then we can work on the fairy silk. So let's get some wire out. This is a 20 gauge beadle-on wire. Let's find the end here. There we go. And we'll just cut a length of this off. Now, I'm not measuring it as I cut it, but I can measure it for you so that we know about how much I've used here. Though I probably won't need this much, I just always am try to be careful and make sure I have plenty. This looks like it's probably about 9 inches. And that's exactly what it is. It's 9 inches. So let's get this little pendant put together, and then we can put it aside and go on to the next piece. So of course what we want to do first is to put the little flower on. So we'll do a wrapped loop at the bottom to do that. Just take your chain nose pliers, make a 90-degree bend. Then I'm going to use my bail making pliers, my stepped ones, to do this. And I will pull that around the top, drop it, and then bring it around. Now before I go on, and I see my lollipop is a little bit lopsided there, so let's straighten her up. There she goes. Before I do anything more, I am going to put our little flower pendant onto here. So to do that, just pull it through onto this little loop you've made, and then we'll hold it in place right above where our connection comes together. Take our other chain nose pliers and do a couple of wraps. Now that we've got those wraps made, check to see if it's towards where you want it to sit, which it is. So we're going to cut that off and tuck this in. So we've got that tucked in there. And now we want to check and see if we like the way it's sitting. Now see, I've got it angled here, so I'm going to straighten that up. And there we are, all ready to go. Now I'm going to push my coils a little bit tighter by just taking the tip of my chain nose and put it in the ring, and then getting across the top. That I notice is not quite as tucked as I want it, so we'll tuck it a little bit better. And there we go. The flower is now on for the pendant. Okay, now that we have our flower all situated, we want to put in our other beads. So we'll just take the ones we've chosen and drop them down onto our wire. Now, one thing I didn't do was check to make sure my beads would fit all right on this wire, which I usually do. And it is something that's quite important, because if they don't fit, well, they don't fit. Isn't that bead pretty? before we finish this up, let's take a look and see if it's looking good. I like that. So now we'll just hook it to our bail. Now you could do this with a jump ring, or you can directly do it to it, which is what I'm going to do. And to do that, just take make sure you've got it to the right direction, bend it, and as you can see, I have a lot of extra wire here, which was something that I was afraid of when I got that much, but I would rather have too much than not enough. So then just take it, wrap it around your bail making plier, bring them back around, straighten her up, and put your bail on. Okay. And we'll grab it with our pliers right up here. And frankly, since I have a lot of wire and I'm not going to have any difficulty wrapping this, I'm just going to do it by hand. There we go. We'll cut this little excess bit off, being careful not to get anything else. And then we'll tuck it in. Be careful as you tuck, because remember, this is glass and you do not want to break it. As you can see, mine is down a little bit, so I'm trying to ease her up. Again, putting the pliers in the loop and then over the top of that wire, and then we'll see if we can get this to tuck nicely in here. Now, as it happens, I'm going to have to take a little more wire off. Now be careful, like I say, when you do things like this, that you don't catch any extra wires or pieces. Okay. This is a little bit crooked, so we'll straighten her up. And there is our pendant finished. Isn't that pretty? So now that our pendant is finished, we'll start with our, that's a little pushed back there. There we go. We will put it aside, get out some SoftFlex, and we will do our bead strands. So let's put this up here so it's not in our way. Get out some crimp tubes. These bottles are not always the easiest to open, and that's fine because we don't want to be having our crimps be the lid coming off and our crimps going everywhere. So we'll put out 4 because that's what we should need for the 2 bead strands. Close her up. Now we'll get our wire out. And I am just going to, this time, work right off the spool. So when I do that, I put a bead stopper down here at the end so that it doesn't go down in so far that I have to go, where the heck did my beads go to? So we're just going to use the pattern we had laid out here and a little spacer bead between each one. Now, because this leaf's holes are up on the edges, instead of these regular spacer beads, I am going to get a couple of little round balls for spacers. I don't need that many, but better too many than not enough. Because the little round ball will fit into that hole better than these round ones. The flat ones will. So, well, if I can get it to go on. There we go. Then we'll put our leaf on. Another one of these. Now, as you can see how that goes down into the leaf, whereas if it had been the flat, it would have been holding the leaf up somewhat. So we don't want that to happen. Let's see if I can get it to focus here for you. There we go. Whoop, drop it. Now back to the rest of the bead strands. Now right here, a bead cap would fit very well around our pearl. And you know what? I think I'm going to find a couple. Okay, I got 4 bead caps out, 2 for each pearl. We'll put this on here like so. Now at this spot, if you wanted to, you could put double spacers. Say we want one of these, as well as the cap. You see how that looks? I like that look, so I think we'll leave it like that. I think these little round ones are, the blue ones are really pretty. Now here is our bead strand. Isn't that pretty? And what we're going to do next is we're going to take one of our crimp tubes, go through one of these rings, and then crimp it onto here. Now you want to make sure that your wire isn't crossed in here, and it's sitting flat on my thumb, so that's fine. So then we put the bead right in that little divot in the magical crimpers and squish down. Turn it, put it in again, and squish again. And you keep doing this until you get a nice round little bead and it won't crimp down anymore. Now we'll do a tug test. Feels good. Now let's see if this little pink bead will go through this. The doubled wire will go through this or not. And strangely, it seems to start, but it wants to stop. So we'll cut most of this off. But we're not going to cut all of it off, since it will start into there, even though it won't finish. It will keep the bead strand slightly secure down here. There we go. So now that we've got that up there, we swing this back down, cut the wire off, and we can measure it now, though we did have about another inch down here before we trimmed it. So it's about, it would have been about 7 inches. So now we do this other side. Put the crimp on. Go through our little wire circular link. And pull her up. Now we'll see if it will go into our little pink bead again. It doesn't seem to want to go in at all this time, so that happens occasionally. We got our beads have too small of a hole for double wires. So I'll just tighten this baby up. Compare our loops, see if they're about the same, which they look like they are right now. We don't want a lot of extra wire though, so we're going to pull this up a little bit. Okay, now we'll take our crimpers, get it on there, being careful not to smack that last bead. Now it loosened a little bit, so we'll tighten it up some. And crimp. And turn and crimp again. Do our tug test. It's good, so we'll trim off this extra wire here. Now we have one side done. There we go, and it'll be like this. And then the fairy silk, a little piece of it will go down in here. Just a little bit between the two. And then this will hang from that. And the rest of the fairy silk will go up around the back. So let's get the second one done. It's exactly like the first one of our bead strands. So we'll just do exactly the same thing. Now, since we know we cut 7 inches of wire, we could just cut the 7 inches right now, and I may just do that. So let's put you aside too, baby. And we'll get 7 inches of wire cut. Okay, that's a little too much. So about right there. And then we can set this aside. Put our ruler aside. And we can do this one of two ways now. We can again use the bead stopper if we wish, or we can just crimp it straight on to this ring, which I think I'm going to do since we are not using stringing right directly onto our spool. Okay, making sure that they're not crossed. And now we will crimp this. Get out of the way, little ring. It doesn't seem to be compacting anymore, so let's do the tug test. And let's see if this first pink one will go onto this. Oops, looks like we may have stopped, even though we're almost there. Okay, looks like we need to cut just a touch of wire off, and then the bead will go on the rest of it. So let's get just this little bit off of here and re-put the bead on over that bit of wire. There we go. Now we're on. So now we'll go and follow the pattern up just like we did before, so that these are the same on side to side. And there we have this side done. We'll put a bead stopper on it, and then we're going to check to make sure that it is the same as the other side. Looks pretty much so to me. So next, of course, is we're going to put the crimp the ring onto here, and we're done with all of these spacers and such, so we can put those away. So let's get our crimp tube and our ring. Back through our crimp tube. And we will see if it will go into this bead at all, or if we are going to have to just trim it right away. I'm thinking trim it right away. So work this down here. Now we'll crimp this side off. Now sometimes I find when I'm doing a crimp with the ring on one side, I just take hold of the ring because it actually lets me hold it steady. Okay, crimp tug test seems to be all right. And now we want to trim this extra wire off really close to our crimp bead. Or tube, as the case may be. It's a bead now after I finish squooshing it. So, okay. So there are now our two sides and our pendant. So now we just have to cut our fairy silk and apply it to the sides. Let's get our excess beads picked up. And then we will decide how much fairy silk we want everywhere. Okay, now what we need to do is decide how much of this is going to go down here at the bottom for the pendant to go through. And the other thing we need to do is then we'll just, well, whatever's left, we'll fold it in half and just use that whole amount for the back of the pendant. So I'm thinking not too much, just enough to bring that beautiful color down into here. So maybe, oh, I don't know, about this much. That looks good. And this is, we'll go with 7 inches. Because I'm probably going to cut this very tip off because it comes down, and we're going to want it to be about the same length. So we'll cut it right here. Now for this, I'm getting regular scissors out. I'm just going to cut it. And then we'll put the rest aside. And like I said, I'm going to cut this very tippy top of this off because it does come down and is not the same as the rest. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to feed this through our bail. Now you could do this with just one layer if you wanted. I just like the two. I like that extra, piece of purple there. The purple is so pretty. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to then feed it through our little circles on the sides. Bring her back down. And then we're going to wrap it with some silver wire. So as you can see, that's going to make it a little smaller anyway. So let's get some more silver wire out, which actually we have this piece left over from earlier. So we can use that on one side. So take our little loop, put our ends through. And then bring them back on themselves, and then wrap them up. Now this is 20 gauge. If you feel a little uncomfortable using 20 gauge because it is a little thicker, go ahead and get a smaller gauge wire. It won't make that much difference. Because we're going to wrap them, 2 or 3 times here. We don't want our wire to let loose here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to bring our wires in good and tight, and we're going to trim them. Making sure you're towards the back when you do your trim here. See, now this one wants to be the front, but that's all right because the other side is not quite, it's not clamped down yet, so we can always move our pendant to the other side. Okay, now we want to take our wire and squish it down so that it doesn't poke you. There it is right there. And if you can, you could tuck it under the wire before it. It won't always go because, you know, you've been wrapping it relatively tight. And then just squish the whole thing down nice and tight. And now we want to do the same thing on this other side over here. Put this little piece of fairy silk through our ring, and then wrap it up tightly with our wire. But I am going to get out a different piece of a little bit longer piece of wire. And as you can see, I knocked this off when we were working on that, and that's fine. We can just put her back on. Now, it doesn't matter which side of these bead strands you gather up when you put these in. Obviously, they're going to be exactly the same since you followed a pattern. So it's not that much of an issue. And if you want, you can also use your pliers to pull these around so you get them good and tight. As you can see, I've been twisting this as I worked, so we want to make sure we've got it nicely on there and everything's going the right direction. So this is, okay, there's the back on that side. We'll want the back over here on this side. We'll take this piece and bring it back to the back again on this other side again. Go. And now we need to tighten these pieces up. Ready? There is the bottom of our necklace. And now we're just going to cut our fairy silk in half and hook it to the top up here. Go up until we run out of it, and then we're going to hook it up to some more of these so we can hook it on to our clasp. So let's get our fairy silk cut. And we're just going to take this one edge, like I said, how it gets a little bit short here. We're going to cut that little teeny bit off. And then we're going to cut our fairy silk in half. So we have two edges. Now, we're going to do this, and we'll see how long this is going to end up being. I think it's going to be just about perfect the way I want it, about 20 inches. So there is 6, which makes 12. And then the fairy silk is about 7.5. Now, it'll go down a bit, of course, when we put the pieces on, but that's fine. It will only go to about, well, this side is actually going to just go right over the beads, and then instead of wrapping it like we did down here, we're just going to wrap it as it comes off of the bend. So, which we could have done on one of these sides down here, but I preferred it to stay that way. And then the top, of course, will go around the ring and wrap like before. So it's going to be about 7 inches. So 12 and 14, we actually may make it a little longer than I want it, but we'll see. So let's get us some more wire out, and we will get these sides put on. So I've got some wire. Take one side, fold it in half, then we're just going to put it through here. Just bring it up like this. Then we'll take our wire and just wrap it right here at where the ring comes together. Now, with the thicker wire, this can get a little tricky. So if you want to, like I say, if you want a smaller wire, go ahead. It is quite a bit easier with a smaller wire to wrap these. I'm just going to do 4 wraps on here. So we'll do one more round. Now we'll pull them up tight to each other, both sides. And now we're going to squish because we don't want it to be skinny like that. So we'll squish it down. And we'll trim our ends off and we'll squish it again. There's that side on. Now we just have to put the other side on. Now we can just finish this one side up by putting the other ring on here if we want. I see that I let this get a little bit out of whack, but we're going to just go ahead and put the other side on right now. So we do that exactly the same way. Even the strands up. Take our wire and wrap. Okay, so now our 2 sides are put on, and we need to do our final step of putting the last ring on so that we can put the clasp on. So to do that, we're just do exactly the same way we have been doing. Put them through the rings, wrap the wire around, and so let's get these. Now, because this is plenty long enough, I'm going to wrap these rings down a little further, and that'll make it a little simpler to wrap it. So. So there is one. I just have to trim it now. Okay. Now if you want to trim off the extra cloth, you can do that as well. I'm probably going to trim it a little bit, but not too much. And then of course you want to make sure that your wire, this one's a little longer than I want it, so I'm going to trim it up a little bit more, is squished down into the cloth, because right now you're up by your neck and you definitely don't want those wires poking into yours or your customers' necks. Okay. And now do the squish down of the wires. And as you can see, I let these side, which is the side that's the one that's going to show them, is the front, go really out of wonk. So let's fix that. So there's one side done, unless you, like I say, you want to cut your cloths off. So now we need to just tuck the other side in to its ring and tighten it up. So we'll just put this in through the ring, and then we're going to compare it as we do it so that we have it about the same length as the other side. So let's okay, that's relatively close. So now we need to start wrapping this side up. So just take your wire, take hold, and pull around. So we want to do this the same 4 loops on this side that we did on the other side. And once we get this all wrapped, then of course we want to clip it, the wires, and push them into the wrap some so that they don't poke people. So let's get those trimmed and punched into the cloth. So we're going to get this last one trimmed here. Making sure we only get the wire, and then we will push this in some. Squish this one down right here. Now I think that this one over here is still a tiny bit long maybe, so we will probably be going to trim it just a touch more. But let's squish these wires down. As you can see, this one is trying to go underneath. And that's fine. If it does go underneath, it's not going to hurt anything. But we do probably want to trim this last little bit off some. So let's pull it up some and get it trimmed. and then push that wire back down into the cloth. Now the thing you want to do is rub your fingers over these, because this is going to be on the back of people's necks. You don't want them to scratch. So let's rub our fingers, see if we can feel any rough spots. And if there are rough spots, you know, you want to try and figure them out and get them out of there if possible. This wrap looks very messy, and I'm not a messy wrap person, but it might just have to be that way. Okay, lastly, we need to put on our clasp. Now I've got a couple of jump rings, and so we're just going to jump ring this onto here. Now if you need to, like I say, if you want to cut the extra cloth off, you can do so now. I don't think it's necessary, but that's entirely up to you. It's one of those preference kind of things. So we'll take the jump rings and hook on our clasp, and then our necklace is finished. Now I noticed I had this backwards, so I just flipped it here. Put it on here, onto one half of your jump ring, and close her up. Now the same on the other side. Open our jump ring, put it through the little connector ring into our jump ring, our clasp, and close her up. Well, if I can get out down here without the magnet grabbing me. There we go. She's all done. So there is our necklace. Isn't that pretty? Nice and bright. Let's see how long she ended up being. Looks like 24 inches. So there we go. There's our necklace. All finished. Okay, so there we are. Our pretty necklace made with some pretty purple fairy silk and the Aurora Borealis bead mix. Isn't that pretty? Now, as long as you've got your wires down good, the fairy silk is very comfortable on the neck. So, matches my shirt. But, yeah. Very simple, very pretty, but very fun necklace. So I love this color of the fairy silk. It goes so well with our Aurora Borealis JJB Mini mix. Hope you enjoyed making this with me. I enjoyed making it with you. This has been Rose from In Rose's Garden. Bye-bye.